Welcome to my channel and welcome to my review of the new Tyranid codex, which is available for pre-order from Games Workshop from today. You can get it next week. And thank you as ever to Games Workshop for sending this through to me for free so I can review it for you guys and give you a little taste of what's inside. Right, first up, I don't really know where to begin because so much has changed. So the first thing I should do is say, don't panic, everything's going to be okay. Don't panic. This is a very good book. I want to take you on a journey from the horror of me originally opening up this book and realizing that almost everything has changed, or everything has changed. Yeah, everything has changed. But most things have changed for the better. Almost everything has changed for the better. There's a couple of nerfs in here, but almost everything has changed for the better. But at the start of my journey, when I looked into the book, I thought, oh no, it's a 9th edition codex. Here we go. And start looking through the data sheets and start looking through the rules. And it was a bit overwhelming at first, because normally when codexes come out, when the Space Marine Codex came out, when codexes come out, 9 times out of 10, there are some changes in the book. Some data sheets stay the same. There are obviously some additions and some tweaks and some nerfs and things like that. Some books are changed more than others, such as the Eldari book. Some changes, not much, like the Necron book, the Death Guard book, Space Marine book, but it tends to be an evolution of the previous material in some manner. This book isn't that. This book is like a restart, a refresh. And for experienced Tyranid players, and I'd like to count myself maybe not as an experienced Tyranid player, but I've been playing them for a good number of years and very much enjoy this faction. They're a very fun faction to play against, a very fun faction to play with. When I'm playing with my Space Marines and named characters are dying, or a Devastator squad can't hold that flank, it gets overwhelmed by a charge and I lose my guns. Those are people dying in my mind. Those are heroes of the Imperium dying in my mind. But when you're playing with Tyranids, you're playing with a wing, you're playing with a swarm, you're playing with a fragment of the hive mind, and you can be the hive mind, and you can send in your troops willy-nilly. You can set up screens and you know that those units are going to be sacrificed, or you can just go busting across the table with monster mash creatures, not caring with whether much of them die or not, because overall in the narrative that world is doomed. The Tyranids have landed on that world in force, and even if your little battle doesn't move in your favor, then you know the planet is almost certainly doomed. And Larry isn't dying in toe-to-toe combat with a Space Marine Heretic Astartes champion, or your Orc Grugger Chugger isn't dying when he gets charged by that Custodian. This is just meat for the gristle. This is more stuff for the grind. They're fun to play with, and they're also fun to play against. I enjoy very much playing against Tyranids because wave upon wave of bugs coming at you. It's a bug planet. It's an ugly planet. It's Starship Troopers. It's aliens. It is the power of the hive mind crushing and dominating planets. And when you get to play against them, you get to pick up a lot of models and you get to get a feeling of that hero hammer. Now my chapter or my company are deploying in strength and I'm trying to push back the tide. They're fun to play with. They're fun to play against. So when I first read this book, I thought, oh no, what have they done to my beautiful baby? And then I had to read it again. And then I had to do something that I've never done when I actually review these books for you guys. It actually got sent to me quite early from Games Workshop. Sometimes they turn up a couple of days before the review date embargo, but this one turned up a couple of weeks before, so I've actually played it, and I've played it twice, and there'll be a battle report coming up on YouTube about it tomorrow. One of the games I didn't film, and one of the games I did film, and I got to play with it, and it's glorious. Because everything's changed, as I said, almost everything has got better, and there's units that you wouldn't take before, or units that people rarely took before, like warriors or ravelers or morlocks or toxocrines, which are good now. So once I got my head around the changes to everything, and once I actually got the models back on the table, Tyranids feel good now. They feel strong now. In assault and scary, they should be scary, and they are much tougher when you hit them. Almost all the data sheets have got extra wounds or extra saves, or they feel more like Tyranids in assault and they feel more like Tyranids when they get assaulted. So for a semi-experienced Tyranid player, that was glorious to learn. And on top of that, I'm thinking, if you're a new player, or if you've been tempted with the idea of getting Tyranids in the past, or you've got a small patrol of... If you're thinking about starting Tyranids, now's the time. Because one, this book is good. But two, because almost everything in it has changed, then experienced players and new players are kind of in the same place. An experienced player, when I was playing both of these games, I was looking in the book and double checking to make sure, did I have any rules at the start of the fight phase? When you shot at that unit over there, is there anything that reduced damage or wounds? I was checking in the book all the time. I didn't know entirely what the interactions did yet because everything has changed. And that's exactly the same place that people find themselves in when they start a new army. New players and experienced players will be around the same experience profile if they both start playing with this new book. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a couple of weeks. I mean, there's a couple of good builds in here, a couple of things that stand out to me, like, okay, this is going to work very well. But it's going to take a while before it all comes out in the wash, and to find out what the really broken combinations are. But it's also going to take a journey for the experienced player to find out what suits their particular play style and what models they've got in their collection that they can use now, just as it's a journey for a new player getting into a new army. Well, that unit looks good and that unit looks good and things like that. And just like it takes a new player building an army from the ground up with new stuff, it's so much has changed. It's a good starting point for newer people, just as it is for experienced people. So I'm going to start at the end of this book. When I normally do reviews, start towards the beginning and then end up on the data sheets, and I barely mention the data sheets. But on this occasion, for this review, I'm going to start at the data sheets at the back. And when I say start at the data sheets at the back, I'm going to give you a flavor of what I mean by everything has changed, because none of these data sheets is exactly the same. Everything's got tougher. So your little bugs, your termagants and your hormogaunts, they've got a 5-up save now instead of a 6-up save. It doesn't sound like much, but a 5-up save on a core unit in cover means that your little bugs will have a 4-up save. A 50-50 chance of saving little bugs against a 1 in 6 chance before. So that's significant. All the middle-sized bugs like Raveners and Warriors and Zoanthropes, they've all gone up to toughness 5. And they used to be toughness 4. All your chunkier bugs like your Hive Guard and your Tyrant Guard have gone up to toughness 6. Tyrant Guard used to be toughness 5 with a 3-up save. Now they're toughness 6 with a 2-up save, and they've got an extra wound to boot, and they're only 35 points. So that's Tyrant Guard for you. Everything in the middle range has got tougher. The little bugs have got an extra armor save, and everything at the top end has got better as well. Exocrines used to be toughness 7 with a 3-up save. Now they're toughness 8 with a 2-up save. Screamer Killer. Here's a good example for you. Screamer Killer used to have 5 attacks on the charge, hitting on 4s. Now they have 11 attacks on the charge, and they hit on 3s. Screamer Killers used to be toughness 7, 8 wounds, 3-up save. Now they're toughness 7, 9 wounds with a 2-up save. A 9 wound model with a 2-up save that reduces damage by 1. It's a Dreadnought. Dreadnoughts reduce damage by 1, but this is better than a Dreadnought because as well as reducing damage by 1, it's got an extra wound, and it's got a 2-up save, and it's got 11 attacks on the charge that hit on 3s. And these 11 attacks are strength 6, minus 3, 3 damage. They're 115 points. 9 of these guys is just over 1,000 points. So for just over 1,000 points, you could go running up the table with 9 Screamer Killers. That's 3 broods of 3. They split off, they count as separate, and you'll have 9 toughness 7, 2-up save models at minus 1 damage with 11 attacks each. Remember, they don't degrade because they're only at 9 wounds, rampaging straight up the battlefield, and they'll be hitting on 3s at minus 3, 3 damage. Glorious. Talking about extra attacks, Toxicrines. Who brings Toxicrines? 12 attacks. Morlocks. Who brings Morlocks? 16 attacks. Yes, it's only damage 1, but it's strength 7 minus 2. 1 damage. Beforehand it was strength 6, AP-1 damage. Now 16 attacks at strength 7, -2, 1 damage. There's so much changes to these data sheets. The main thing to remember is everything's got tougher. Everything's either got a better armor save, or more wounds, or tougher, or a combination of. The days where Tyranid armies got shot off the table are gonna go. It's been beefed up to 9th edition, so all your units are a bit more resilient. Everything's got a few more attacks as well, and some of them have got a crazy number of attacks. Nids are scary again. Lots of other little changes as well. The Morlock and the Trigon have moved to the fast slot from the heavy slot. The Trigon Prime has moved from the heavy slot to the HQ slot. Ripper Swarms have moved from troop slots to fast attack slots. So having little units of Rippers in the backfield sitting on objectives has gone now. They're now in fast attack, so they've lost objective secured, because all troops in this book have objective secured. But Gargoyles have come from the fast attack slot and are now in the troop slot. So you've got 12 units, tiny little bugs. They're 8 points each, your Gargoyles, and they're moving 12 inches, and they've got objective secured troops. Gene Stealers went to the elite slot, so that's going to be a bit of a nerf to the Gene Stealers, and you can only bring them in the units of up to 10 now. So gone are the days where you're going to see big squads of Gene Stealers sweeping across the board. Gene Stealers potentially could be one of the ones in this codex that has been degraded a little bit. For example, the Hive Guard with their Impaler cannons that could shoot 36 inches around corners. Well, Impaler cannons now only shoot 24 inches around corners. But Hive Guard have got toughness 6 with 4 wounds now. So the ones that were particularly broken, like lots of units of Hive Guard and lots of units of Gene Stealers, aren't necessarily nerfed, but Gene Stealers to elite slot is a bit of a nerf. But they're in line with the other things in this book, because everything else in this book is better. Exocrines, 2-up save, toughness 8 now. They used to fire twice with a strat, but now Exocrines fire D3 plus 6. So they don't fire twice anymore, but they're going to have 7 to 9 shots every single time. And it used to be strength 7 -3 2 damage, and now it's strength 8 -4 3 damage at D3 plus 6 shots all the time. And they can move now. They can, if they stay still or move half range, the target doesn't receive benefits of cover for that attack. But if they move the whole way, they'll still be hitting on 3s at strength 7 8 9. At 7 8 9 shots, strength 8 -4 3 damage. They're going to having more reliable output all the time for 170 points, and with a 2-up save and toughness 8 as well. They're going to be hard to shift. Almost all the big bugs have got, well, half of the big bugs are now 3-up save, toughness 7, but half of them are now 2-up save at toughness 8 with more wounds. Now, if I broke down every single change to every single data sheet in this video would be 2 hours long. You'd also get drowned in noise, and all the information would just blur into one change. There will be other reviewers out there, I'm sure, that will break down every single bit and what that means for the meta and what that means for the game, but that's not what this review is about. This review is about letting you know that all the units have been, most of the units have been upgraded, and most of them are scary now. Most of them are worth taking. I think I want to highlight one of them. Let's highlight 2, but let's talk about troops. Let's talk about warriors. People didn't really bring warriors before. Toughness 4 with a 4-up save. Well, now they're toughness 5 with a 4-up save for 25 points each, and you don't have to pay for Death Spitters or Bone Swords. There's some of the upgrades that you need to pay for them, but they're Synapse, so warriors are fearless. And at toughness 5 with a 4-up save, particularly as you can put Catalyst on them, Catalyst hasn't really changed. They're not going to go away anytime soon. And they come with Scything Talons. And they have 3 attacks, but each time the bearer fights, it makes 1 additional attack with this weapon. So if you give them 2 Scything Talons, they're going to have 5 attacks at strength 5, -1, 1 damage. And a gun, a Death Spitter gun at assault 3, strength 5, -2, 1 damage. So for 25 points, a Tyranid warrior But remember, a intercessor is 20 points. A Tyranid warrior for 25 points will have 5 attacks in close combat at -1 strength 5 and 3 shots at strength 5, -2, 1 damage. It's only got a 4-up save instead of a 3-up save that an intercessor has, but it's toughness 5 with 3 wounds instead of toughness 4 with 2 wounds. For a 5-point more than an intercessor, Tyranid warriors are points for points significantly and noticeably better than Space Marines. And having 3 wounds as well when there's so much damage to weaponry out there is absolutely glorious. You can give them dual bone swords. So each time the bearer fights, it makes 1 additional attack with this weapon. So you'll have 4 attacks with dual bone swords on them. And if you give the unit adrenal glands, they get +1 movement and +1 strength. What does that mean? A unit of 9 warriors with adrenal glands will have, each of those warriors will have 4 attacks each. So that's 36 attacks coming at you. A unit of 9 with bone swords, that's 36 attacks coming at you at strength 8, -2, 2 damage. And you can give them a gun. And it's those bone swords are free. Tyranid warriors are a big winner. Raveners, 30 points instead of 20 points. No one ever bought Raveners. They're also a big winner because they have the same toughness now, toughness 5 and a 4-up save that the warriors have, but they have an extra wound. So toughness 5, 4 wounds with a 4-up save, and then moving 12. And you can give them scything talons as well. They have core, but they don't have synapse. So Tyranid warriors for the win. I think even just the little bugs, even the little termagants. Termagants, 7 points a model, yes, but their pistol, the flesh borer, is now strength 5 -1, 1 damage at 18-inch range. So you've got a 7-point model. Gargoyles have this as well. Strength 5 -1, 1 damage on a base pistol. So those are better than the heavy bolt pistols that intercessors have. They're not pistols, by the way, they're assault war weapons at 18-inch range, strength 5 -1, 1 damage. But yeah, they hit on 4s with this range, but termagants can be upgraded by a tervagon, so they hit on 3s instead of hitting on 4s. Even termagants, big swarms of them with those little guns, they're going to be difficult to remove, and their shots are scary now. When I look at the data sheets and the tweaky little changes that they've made here or there, I don't really know what is going to work best with another unit. Should I bring loads of swarms and add lots of shooty? And is that going to be overwhelming enough? I don't know. I haven't tried it out. Or do I go for Hive Guard and Warriors and Raveners and then lots of big bugs? So everything in my army is either toughness 5 or higher. And I've got some firepower, I've got some wounds that can take it, and I've got some big bugs with toughness 8 with a 2-up save, just charging down to towards people's lines. And if you're doing an aggressive list that way, then you're going to be covering the board, scoring objectives. Is that going to work best? And if so, in what combination? Difficult to say after only playing it twice, which is why I like this book. I want to try out so many different combinations. I want to get new models because of this book, to try out other combinations, and the Tyranids are scary again. I'm a big fan. I've been railing against the complexity of 9th edition books, and this one, at first glance, this was my journey. At first glance, because of all the changes, seemed really complex. It's not complex, it's just changed. So talking about complexity, the next thing I want to introduce you guys to is the notion of Synaptic Link, because inside this book, you've got Synaptic Link abilities. 1 minute, before we do, Synapse. Any Tyranid unit within 6 inches of a Synapse model counts as fearless. Now, you don't have to take morale. It's only 6-inch range. And then Synapse, what is Synaptic Link range is? Well, beforehand, in the old book, a unit of Gene Stealers in range of a Broodlord will have certain abilities. A unit of Zoanthropes in range of a Neurothrope will gain certain abilities. That's all gone. Everything has changed. Instead, what you have is units that have certain abilities, or psychic powers that have certain abilities, and they'll affect any unit within Synaptic Link range. Broodlords do not just affect Gene Stealers anymore, for example. The Broodlord has Vicious Insight, and it will affect any core Hive Fleet unit in Synaptic Link range and give it an improved armor penetration characteristic in melee on 6s. But what is Synaptic Link range? Okay, go back to the Synaptic Link range thing. This is a Winged Hive Tyrant, Tyranid Prime, and Trigon, and they have synapse and they have abilities that affect things within Synaptic Link range. This Tyranid Prime has the Alpha Warrior ability. In new command phase, select one friendly Hive Fleet core unit within Synaptic Link range, and that core unit will be able to re-roll wound rolls of 1 when it makes attack. So if this potato was a core unit and it's within 12 inches of the prime, in the command phase it can tell one potato to re-roll wound rolls of 1. But Synaptic Link is a 12-inch range. If the prime is within 12 inches of another model with synapse, then he can link his Alpha Warrior ability to go from here to that creature to the potato if it was a core unit in the command phase. One core unit once in the command phase. The Winged Hive Tyrant can affect one core unit once within 12 inches of itself to reroll hit rolls of 1 in the command phase. But if it is linked within 12 inches of the Tyranid Prime, who is linked within 12 inches of the Tervagon, which is also a synaptic creature, then if the potato was a core unit, then in the command phase, the Winged Hive Tyrant could tell the potato to reroll hit rolls of 1, or the Tyranid Prime could tell it to reroll wound rolls of 1. Indeed, you could tell it to reroll hit rolls and reroll wound rolls in the command phase if it wasn't just a potato. It's only core units, it's only once, so if you want to do the reroll wound rolls of 1 a couple of times, you're going to need a couple of Tyranid Primes. If you want to do the reroll hit rolls of 1 a couple of times, you're going to need a couple of Winged Hive Tyrants, but you can only bring 1 Winged Hive Tyrant per detachment. Another thing you can do is say the Winged Hive Tyrant has Catalyst, which is a 5-up Feel No Pain, and it can affect any Tyranid unit within Synaptic Link range. Well, he could cast Catalyst on the Tyranid Prime, or he could link it and cast Catalyst down onto the Tervagon, or he could link it all the way down and cast it on the potato. So the instinctive behavior rule has gone. Instead, we have Synaptic Link, which represents how synapse creatures are linked through the army and sending abilities or psychic powers down, up and down the tendrils of the hive mind. If the potato is way outside 12-inch range of anything with synapse, then it won't be able to be affected by an ability or a psychic power within Synaptic Link range. The potato would need to be within 12 inches of one of these and not just a potato. Having actually played with this codex a couple of times, it works. You want to keep information flowing up and down the Synaptic Link of the hive mind so the potato gets all of the buffs you need it to whenever you need it to. Okay, so just to summarize those core changes, there's no instinctive behavior anymore. Instead, you've got Synaptic Link. And fearless models, synapse range, never taking morale, is only 6 inches from synaptic creatures anymore. Shadow of the Warp is still the same. It's still an 18 inches Shadow of the Warp, -1 to enemy psychic tests. But if they suffer a perils, they add 1 to the mortal wounds that they take when they have a perils. So Shadow in the Warp has been beefed a little bit. So those are the core changes, and then we'll go back to where I normally start when I do these reviews, which is the actual Hive Fleets themselves. Hive Fleet Behemoth, Hive Fleet Kraken, Hive Fleet Leviathan, Gorgon, Yormonger. So Hive Fleets. Beforehand in the whole Tyranid book, there'd be 2 adaptations you could do. So I like to play Kraken. Kraken could fall back and charge, and when they advanced, they rolled 3 dice and picked the highest. You have other dual abilities for other hive sheets. Leviathan would do 2 things, Yormonger would do 2 things, etc., etc. Now in this new book, every hive fleet does two things, but you can swap out the second thing. You'll stick with the first thing all the time, but you can swap out the second thing. And you choose whether you want to swap out the second thing in the battle after first turn has been decided. So for example, Kraken, so my army is Kraken. Whenever anything in my army charges, the AP characteristic of melee attacks is increased by 1. Basically, my whole army, Kraken, scarier on the charge. Bone Swords become AP -2, Scything Talons become AP -1, Rending Claws become AP -5 on the charge for everything in my entire army. And then I have a second ability for Kraken called Adaptive, and when I advance, instead of rolling a dice to advance, I just advance D3 plus 3. Now, I always keep, if I'm playing Kraken, I always keep the +1 AP for melee on the charge, but I can swap out the adaptive stratagem, the D3 plus 3 advance bit. I can swap out the second part of my adaptation for either a feed biomorphology or a hunt biomorphology. And I decide whether to do that in turn 1. And one of the things I could swap out for example, is my whole army gets to heroically intervene. So +1 attack when I charge, and that little squab of boys, or that swarm of gaunts can heroically intervene, or that hive tyrant can heroically intervene, or those gene stealers can heroically intervene. My whole army would be able to heroically intervene like a character can, instead of that bonus for making advance rolls. I could swap it out for that. Another one that I could do in the feed biomorphology is +1 to charge. So my whole army, when I charge, gets +1 AP when I hit you, and when I charge, when I roll that dice roll, my whole army +1 to charge when I'm rolling my charge range. There are 3 biomorphologies: hunt, lurk, and feed, and there are 5 options in each. And each hive fleet gets to choose from 2. So Kraken gets to choose from hunt or feed. Leviathan gets to choose from hunt or feed. Jormungandr and Gorgon gets to choose from lurk or feed. So the way it works is you get 2 basic abilities for your hive fleet, and you can swap out a second one from one of those 2 tables there, and there's 5 in each table. So you've got 10 choices to pick from when you select your army. Now that's a bit 9th edition and a bit over the top, and if it was me writing the rules, I like the idea of the flexibility. I like the idea of the hive mind reacting to the opponent, the army, the faction they see opposite them. And I would have boiled it down so Kraken has their base ability, and then maybe Kraken could pick 1, 2, 3 things. So you could pick this one, or this one. And so there's 3 different types of builds for a Kraken army. That's what I would have done, but it's 9th edition. So what we've got instead is we've got a table with 5 things that I can pick from one trait, and 5 things that I can pick through from another trait. I suspect that most Tyranid players you have to stick with the first one. You have to stick with the first base ability, but the second base ability, I expect most Tyranid players will be swapping out that second ability, that second adaptation all the time, and trying different things. So what's better for Kraken? Unstoppable Swarm, ignoring any and all modifiers to move, advance, and charge rolls? Or is it Wreathed in Shadow? Units can never fire Overwatch or set to defend against charging Kraken units. There's a chocolate box of things to choose from. I wish there'd have been less to choose from, because it bends my brain and I'm very stupid. But the choice is a good thing, and it's not that complicated. For 9th edition, it's surprisingly straightforward. It's certainly not like the crossfire mechanic in the Gene Stealer Cults book, or the Martial Katars from the Custodes book. It's, you have this base ability, and here's a bunch of other base abilities that you can pick from. Now, the standout winner is Hive Fleet Leviathan. Hive Fleet Leviathan's first adaptation is, each time an attack is made against a Synapse unit, they get Transhuman. And each time attack is made against a unit that hasn't got Synapse, it's got mini Transhuman, can't be wounded on a 1 or 2. So all your Synapse creatures in High Fleet Leviathan, your warriors, for example, your toughness 5, 3 wound, 4 up save warriors, or your Tyranid Prime, or your Hive Tyrant, or your Brood Lord, or your Neurothrope and Zoanthropes, all your Synapse creatures cannot be wounded on a 1, 2, or 3, and everything that is not Synapse cannot be wounded on a 1 or 2. So your bigger bugs that aren't Synapse, or even your tiny little bugs, which, let's face it, tiny little bugs tend to get wounded on 2s quite an awful lot. Well, they'll only be wounded on a 3. So I already spoke at the start of the review how all the data sheets have changed and everything's got either tougher or a better armor save or more wounds, or a combination of all 3. They've got tougher and better armor save and more wounds. So add on top of that transhuman and mini transhuman to Synapse stuff and non-Synapse stuff, your whole army only be wounded on a 3+, or in some cases a 4+, on top of the toughness and the wounds that they have. Means that Leviathan, to me, at first glance, is the standout winner of the High Fleets. An army of bugs whose data sheets have all changed to make them tougher gets tougher again with High Fleet Leviathan. And remember, that's their first High Fleet adaptation. They also have the second part, which they can swap out for up to 10 other choices in feed or hunt. Their second part is each time a unit with this adaptation is selected to shoot or fight, you can re-roll a hit roll. So speaking the language of Space Marines, which most of us understand, High Fleet Leviathan has transhuman or mini transhuman and Master Artisans. That's what they come with. But you can swap out the Master Artisans bit, re-roll a hit roll, for, as I said, many, many other nice things. Each High Fleet comes with its own signature psychic power, its own relic, and its own stratagem. Opportunistic Advance on High Fleet Kraken is glorious now. Opportunistic Advance means when you make an advance roll, don't roll, just move an extra 8 inches. So this happened to me. I had a Screamer Killer. Screamer Killer's now moved 10, and I spend 1 CP on that Screamer Killer, so it moves 10 plus 8 inches on the advance. That's a Screamer Killer that's moved 18 inches. Then you cast Onslaught on that Screamer Killer because you've made sure that you're in Synaptic Link range. And after moving 18 inches, that Screamer Killer then charges. And it charges with 11 attacks. Strength 6 minus 3 damage. 11 attacks. Opportunistic Advance combined with Onslaught are going to make Kraken armies scary. But, as I said, Leviathan seems to be the big winner. I'm not going to go through all the other High Fleets. What you can do as well is you can say that your army isn't from any of the named High Fleets, and you can just take 2 of these biomorphologies instead. You could take X or Y from the list of 15 that you can pick. So that's the Psychic Power Onslaught. It hasn't changed. Catalyst has changed a little bit. It's a 5 up, feel no pain, but if you put it on a Titanic model, it's only a 6 up, feel no pain, which will stop those broken Forge World lists where people are bringing massive bugs and just chucking Catalyst on them. So the big bugs, so the Titanic bugs now won't ignore wounds on a 5. They'll only ignore wounds on a 6, but that's only if you bring all the Forge World stuff. The horror has changed. It's no longer point at a unit and they get -1 to hit. It affects their leadership and affects combat attrition tests. There's a new psychic power in here called Neuroparasite, which has an 18-inch range. And basically you roll a dice for every model in the unit that you hit. And every dice roll that exceeds that unit's toughness does a mortal wound to that unit, up to a maximum of 6 mortal wounds. So you could smite a unit within 18 inches. And if it's a toughness 4 unit, then you can roll a chunk of dice for every models in that unit and potentially do 2, 3, 4 more wounds to that unit with a neuroparasite psychic power. All the Warlord traits have been tweaked a little bit. I mean, to be honest, the first 2 times I played with it, I just picked adaptive biology and gave my Warlord a 5 up, feel no pain, because it was simple and I didn't have to remember another rule. There's adaptive physiologies in here as well. These are upgrades, point upgrades that you can give monster units that are not characters and not Titanics. Now, the thing about the adaptive physiologies are you can only give one adaptive physiology per monster, which is not a character, and you can't give more than one of them. So there's dermic symbiosis in here, which I used to run a lot, and I used to pay the CP to have a couple of units with a couple of dermic symbioses. Symbiosis. Now you can only use it once. You can pay 25 points now instead of CP and give a unit, which is not a character, dermic symbiosis once, and you can't cut and paste that to another one. Dermic symbiosis for 25 points, however, will give that monster unit a 4+ invulnerable save. That's a beautiful thing to put on a Tyranofex or a Screamer Killer or a Harrowspex, one of your big bugs now, or a Toxicrene. And you're thinking, why am I bringing a Harrowspex or a Toxicrene? Well, because they're good now, and for 25 points you can give them a 4+ invulnerable save. And there is Enraged Reserves, Hardened Biology, Whipcoil Reflexes, Voracious Ammunition. There are a number of different upgrades that you can choose for monster units. Always fight first, or give a monster Shadow in the Warp and Synapse. But basically people will be spending 25 points to put Dermic Symbiosis on their Exocrines or their Tyranofexes in the back. Because 25 points for a 4+ invulnerable save on a really big beastie will keep the really big beastie alive. Stratagems. Lots of stratagems. Lots of things to mention in here. Single-minded annihilation has gone. Picking an infantry unit and firing with that infantry unit has gone. 1 or 2 units of Hive Guard sat at the back of the board, firing out across the board twice has gone. And that might seem a little bit of a nerf to Tyranid players initially, but the reason why that stratagem was used all the time was because it was a really good stratagem. And now what you've got is half of these stratagems jump off the page to me straight away as really good stratagems. Instead of only having 2 or 3 or 4 stratagems that you went to all the time, because there's so many changes to the 4 pages of stratagems, it's hard to see which one is going to get used all the time. I know in both of my games I used a number of different stratagems. Voracious Appetite is still in here. Reroll wound rolls in close combat. Rapid Regeneration is in here, so you can put D3 units back on a Tyranid monster, but it only costs 1 CP instead of 2 CP. Overrun is still in here. And Power of the Hive Mind. Here's my Synapse creature with a psychic power. I'm going to spend a CP so it can do 2 psychic powers rather than just 1 psychic power. All the good ones, the go-to ones, are in here, but there's a bunch of new ones which I quite like as well. So Indomitable Monstrosity, for example. For 1 CP you can put Transhuman on a monster, so it can't be wounded on a 1, 2, 3. Say that monster is going to get targeted by a really big gun, an Inferno Cannon or something at strength 12 or 14. You can give it 1, 2, 3. You can't wound it. You've brought little bugs, and in the corner of the table there's only 2 or 3 of them left. Well, spend 1 CP for Endless Swarm, and you can add D3 plus 3 units back to that little swarm of bugs in the corner while they're sitting on and holding that objective for you. 1 CP, Endless Swarm, 4 to 6 bugs back in. Nice. You can combine that with the Tervagon's power. Tervagon can feed little bugs back into units of Tervagants. So she can do that anyway. 2d6. She swarms back in, spawns back in, so long as there's a unit of Termagants within 6 inches of her. She could spawn 2d6 little bugs back into that unit. Then you could pay a CP for Endless Swarm and add another d3 plus 3 models back into that unit of Termagants. 1 CP, Encircle the Prey. If you've got units that have the Burrower's ability or the Fly ability, such as Gargoyles, they can fly, Winged Hive Tyrants, they can fly, or Burrowers, like Raveners, Morlocks and Trigons, they can go back underground now, or fly off into the air now, and redeploy elsewhere in the battle. It costs 1 CP to pick them up, and then you put them back down more than 9 inches away from an enemy unit in the reinforcement step of your next turn. And there's many things in this book with the burrower or fly keyword, and being able to reposition a unit that's out of position on one side of the battle grid all the way across to the other side of the battle grid for 1 CP in turns 4 or 5 wins games. If you upgrade units with the adrenal glands upgrade, it'll get +1 movement and +1 strength to its attacks, but it also unlocks the adrenal surge stratagem. For 1 CP, you can give that monster D3 extra attacks, or you could give a unit that has adrenal glands an extra attack per model. You can get Tyranid warriors attacking with 6, 7 attacks. You can get Raveners attacking with 7, 8 attacks with the per model with the adrenal surge stratagem. It costs 1 CP if it's got 5 or less models, 2 CP if it's more than 5 models. And then, of course, there's lots of unit-specific stratagems for Exocrines, Lictors, Hormagaunts, etc. I won't go into those unit-specific stratagems here. And then there's the relics. There's the normal upgraded weapons in here and a couple of very interesting ones. How about the Maw Claws of Thyrax? Give that to a Hive Tyrant with a pair of monstrous scything talons. If a Hive Tyrant has 2 monstrous scything talons, it's got 7 attacks, strength 7 -3, 2 damage, 7 attacks. And the Maw Claws of Thyrax will get you 8 attacks at strength 7, will allow you to re-roll all wounds with those 8 attacks at strength 7, and every time you kill a model, you add an attack to that unit up to a maximum of 3. So if the Hive Tyrant manages to kill 3 models in a game, he'll be up to 11 attacks at strength 7, -3, 2 damage, re-rolling all wounds. How about the Dirge Heart of Carcass? After the bearer makes a fight and resolves all of its attacks against an enemy unit, that enemy unit loses objective secured. It just loses it for a turn, but you can send that Winged Hive Tyrant in or a Broodlord in against a unit of troops holding on to objective. Do your attacks, so long as it's still it doesn't say that that model needs to be alive at the end of it. It just says that that unit loses objective secured until the end of next turn. How about putting it on one of your, again, Hive Tyrants, Broodlords, or something really choppy, and giving it the Passenger relic? You've got to upgrade it with adrenal glands as well, but you put adrenal glands on it, so it's got +1 move anyway, and then when it charges, it gets adds 2 to the advance, it gets adds 2 to its charge rolls. Moving quicker with adrenal glands, +2 to charge rolls anyway. Winged Hive Tyrants will be moving 17 and charging 2d6s plus. It's just, there's some nice combinations in here. I don't know which one's the best one. And so we'll come to the conclusion. We'll wrap it up there. This was an emotional roller coaster for me because initially so much had changed. I was confused, and then so many new little rules and nuances. I was confused. And then when I read it and read it again, I realized, 1 minute, this is a really good book for new players or players thinking about starting this faction, because it resets almost everything for everyone, including experienced players. Also, all the core data sheets in themselves, all the data sheets of almost all of them have got better. Some of them had a bit of a nerf, but almost all of them have got better, and there's lots of interesting things to try now. The Synaptic Link range mechanic makes narrative sense as well as game sense. It's not completely broken, but it's also, it'll flow like the will of the hive mind. And just the simple mechanics of you being able to adapt your core hive fleet on the fly in turn 1. Tell your opponent, obviously, that, okay, you've got first turn, I'm going to have this. Or I've got first turn, well, I'm going to get +1 to charges. Having that in there, it's a nice book. It's a new way to play Tyranids. They feel scary again, and it speaks to me narratively as well. And it isn't too complex for a 9th edition books. Once you get your head around it, the rules are fairly ABC. This one does this. This one does this. Long story short, there were occasions in previous battle reports 6 months ago where one of my big bugs had charged a rhino or charged a tank and just bounces. Doesn't do much damage, doesn't do much wounds. Now they'll eat stuff. You don't want a big bug charging you. And who would? And who should? They should be scary. You're going to need to put round after round into them. You're going to need to select your targets effectively, and they'll be able to take it more, particularly if they're Hive Fleet Leviathan with mini transhuman and transhuman on the synapse creatures. So I'll shut up. I'm looking forward to playing Tyranids again. It feels like a whole new adventure. And if you're a Tyranid player, then you've got a lot to look forward to and a lot to unpack and discover in this book as well, in my opinion. So I'll shut up. Thank you for listening. Happy wargaming.